Hey everyone, welcome back to Her Final Word. I'm Christy. They say that blood is thicker than water, but when it comes to coveted land and multi-million-dollar real estate, greed turns family into absolute strangers. Today's story comes from an incredible 60-year-old agricultural founder named Martha. After 30 years of turning a humble family farm into an award-winning organic estate, her younger brother and his arrogant son conspired to label Martha as incapacitated, forge land deeds, and sell the entire farm to a toxic industrial developer. But the way Martha crashed their live land auction in front of the region's elite? Pure, cold-blooded brilliance. Before we jump in, tell me in the comments below. Drop your city and let me know if you've ever seen family members tear each other apart over land or property. Where are the most intense family estate battles happening? Make sure to watch until the very end. Right after Martha's story, I'm going to give you 3 essential psychological strategies on how to protect real estate and family assets from greedy relatives, and how to make a liar destroy themselves in public. Let's get right into it. I'm 60 years old. For 3 decades, I poured my sweat, soul, and savings into Oak Ridge Organic Estate, a 300-acre sustainable farm and artisanal creamery that I built from a bankrupt patch of soil into a world-renowned brand. I live simply, prioritizing land preservation and my team of 30 local workers over personal luxury. When my parents passed away 20 years ago, I bought out my younger brother Richard's small share of the farm. He took his cash payout, moved to the city, and lost it all on bad stock investments. Richard was 55, perpetually bitter, and raised his son, Ethan, to believe that our family's success was somehow stolen from them. To Richard and Ethan, my silver hair and quiet rural lifestyle weren't symbols of hard-won peace. They saw me as an isolated old woman sitting on $50 million worth of prime commercial land. A massive industrial chemical conglomerate offered to buy my farm to pave it into a processing plant. I refused immediately. Preserving the soil was my life's mission. But Richard and Ethan smelled a $10 million finder's commission. They decided that if I wouldn't sell the land, they would simply steal it from under my feet. Greedy relatives don't attack with honesty. They use psychological warfare and legal backdoors. Richard and Ethan began a quiet campaign to paint me as senile and unable to manage my affairs. Ethan started visiting local town council meetings and county agricultural boards, shaking hands and dropping heavy, fake, sympathetic sighs. "It's so heartbreaking about Aunt Martha," he'd tell local officials. "She's forgetting irrigation schedules, hallucinating about soil contamination, and letting the farm rot. My dad and I are stepping in before she burns the family legacy down." I started noticing strange occurrences. Essential supply shipments were mysteriously canceled. Local bank managers started asking me uncomfortable questions about who held power of attorney for my accounts. Then came the turning point. I returned from a weekend agricultural conference to find Richard, Ethan, and 2 corporate land surveyors walking through my private pastures with clipboard folders. "What are you doing on my property, Richard?" I asked, pulling up in my farm truck. Richard pulled out a smug, practiced grin. "Your property? Martha, look at yourself. You're 60, knee-deep in mud, clinging to an old farm." Ethan and I filed emergency conservatory paperwork with a corrupt magistrate 2 towns over. "We've been granted temporary stewardship over the land while your mental fitness is evaluated." Ethan smirked, leaning against my truck. "The land auction is next Friday at the country club, Auntie. A chemical company is paying $50 million. You'll get a nice, comfortable room in a private care home, and Dad and I will handle the real money." I didn't yell, wave my hands, or try to physically throw them off my driveway. I knew that if I lost my composure, Richard's lawyers would use my anger as proof of my emotional instability. Instead, I drove straight to the state capitol to meet with my private estate attorney and the state director of agriculture. What Richard and Ethan didn't know was that 6 months prior, sensing their rising desperation, I had initiated the legal process to place the entire 300-acre estate into a permanent, irrevocable state conservation land trust. Under state law, once land is transferred into a conservation trust, it can never be sold to commercial developers, built on or auctioned, even if the owner passes away or loses legal capacity. The deed becomes legally untouchable forever. The final paperwork had been signed and sealed by the governor's agricultural board 48 hours before Richard filed his fake conservatorship claim. The land didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to the state trust, with me as the lifetime executive trustee. Furthermore, my attorney discovered that Ethan had forged my signature on a preliminary land title deed to secure a $2 million cash deposit from the industrial developers, a deposit he and Richard had already spent buying luxury sports cars and paying off their personal debts. Instead of serving Richard with a lawsuit right away, I let him proceed with his grand auction. I knew that if I stopped him quietly in a law office, Richard would tell the family I was a bitter sister who ruined his financial future. I wanted his fraud exposed in front of every real estate mogul, local politician, and journalist in the county. In secret, I coordinated with the state attorney general's fraud unit and the state police. "We can arrest them at their office, Martha," the prosecutor suggested. "No," I replied calmly. They invited the press and the chemical corporation to the country club auction hall. They want to publicly celebrate selling my life's work. Let them take the opening bids. Let them accept the stolen deposit. I wanted their downfall to be absolute, public, and legally inescapable. Friday evening. The grand ballroom at the country club was filled with wealthy land investors, corporate representatives in expensive suits, and local news crews. Richard stood at the podium in a brand-new Italian suit, smiling broadly beside Ethan, who was holding a glass of champagne. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard announced into the microphone, "tonight my son and I are proud to open bidding for the historic 300-acre Oak Ridge estate. My sister Martha has retired to a peaceful care facility, leaving the future of this land in our capable hands. Opening bid starts at $30 million. Corporate buyers immediately raise their paddles. $35 million, $40 million, $45 million. Richard and Ethan beamed, exchanging high fives on stage. Right as the auctioneer shouted, "Going once at $45 million." The heavy mahogany double doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open. I walked down the main aisle. I wore an immaculate tailored tweed blazer, polished leather boots, my gray braid resting over my shoulder, holding a leather briefcase. Beside me walked 2 state police investigators and the director of the State Conservation Registry. The ballroom fell into a stunned silence. Investors turned, whispering in confusion. Ethan's face turned ghost white. Richard panicked, grabbing the microphone. "Security! Get this woman out!" "She's my mentally unstable sister. She escaped her facility." I walked up the stage steps, stopped at the podium, and pulled out a gold-stamped document. "Good evening," my voice echoed steadily through the room. "My brother just told you I'm in a care home and that he owns Oak Ridge Estate. But this document from the State Land Registry proves that 3 days ago, the entire 300 acres were placed into a permanent conservation trust." I looked at the corporate buyers in the front row. "This land can never be built on, sold, or paved. The deed my nephew Ethan presented to you is a forged document." The room erupted into absolute bedlam. The corporate buyers leapt from their seats, shouting at Richard and demanding their $2 million deposits back. Before Richard or Ethan could run toward the back exit, state troopers stepped onto the stage, blocking their path and forcing their hands behind their backs. Ethan started crying hysterically, his luxury watch catching the camera light as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Dad, do something. You said she wouldn't check the registry. You said she was just an old farm woman. Richard looked at me with pure hatred, his voice trembling in desperation. Martha, we're blood. You can't do this to your own family. You're destroying your nephew's life. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided my life's work was yours to sell, Richard, I said softly, looking him dead in the eye. You wanted my land, but all you're getting is a state prison cell. The news cameras flashed non-stop as Richard and Ethan were marched out of the country club in handcuffs, fully exposed as frauds and thieves in front of the entire region. Because they had already spent the corporate deposit money on luxury goods, the developers sued them into personal bankruptcy. Richard and Ethan were sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for grand land fraud and forgery. I returned to Oak Ridge Estate. The air was clean, the soil was safe, and the land was protected for generations to come. They thought my quiet life made me weak, but they forgot the most basic rule of the earth. You reaps exactly what you sow. What a brilliant, unshakable victory. Richard and Ethan thought they could bully a quiet rural woman, but Martha protected her legacy with ironclad legal foresight. She didn't waste her breath arguing on a dirt road. She put her land into a trust and let her greedy relatives walk straight into a federal trap. If you ever find yourself dealing with greedy family members trying to claim your property or assets, here are 3 essential rules from Her Final Word. 1. Secure real estate in a trust early. Never leave valuable land or property in simple personal ownership if you have greedy relatives. Placing assets into a land trust or irrevocable family trust makes them legally immune to forced sales, fake conservatorships, or forgery. 2. Document your competence. If relatives start spreading rumors about your health or age, immediately obtain certified medical and legal affidavits confirming your full mental capacity. Turn their lie into a dead end before they can use it in court. 3. Let the fraud reach completion. When someone forges your signature or steals a title, don't confront them privately. Let them present the fake document to a third party or accept stolen funds. The moment money exchanges hands on a forged deed, it turns a family argument into a felony with mandatory prison time. Now, I want to hear from you. Martha sent her own brother and nephew to federal prison for 7 years and forced them into complete bankruptcy after exposing them at a public auction. Was this the ultimate, well-deserved justice for trying to steal her life's work, or should she have shown family mercy and settled it out of court? Whose side are you on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to Her Final Word. Remember, the final word should always belong to you. See you next time.